Have you ever been confused by some of the terms that's used by estate agents when you're buying or selling a property? Well, I want to cover off some of the most confusing terms and what they mean. So let's kick this off with one that's always a little bit contentious, gazumping. So gazumping is when a seller has accepted an offer in principle from a buyer and then later accepts another higher offer from another buyer. Gazundering. So the opposite of gazumping. This is where the purchaser of the property, they've had their offer accepted, everything's all progressing nicely, and then they reduce their offer on the property just prior to exchange of contracts. So this tactic can sometimes be used after a survey has been carried out and they think that there's a lot more work required to the property, or perhaps they just over-offered in the first place with the plan to do this later down the line anyway. Capital gains tax. Now this is something that's actually often forgotten about when you come to sell a property, and this is a tax that you have to pay on the profit you make when you sell. So it's not dependent on how much you sell it for, it's dependent on the profit you make. So say you bought a property for 250,000, you sold it for 500,000, you could be potentially liable for capital gains tax on 250,000. However, like with most taxes, there's tax-free allowances and there's lots of things that go into how the calculation is made up as to what tax is due. So I would definitely recommend you speak to a specialist tax advisor to work out what your capital gains liability is and how to minimise this. Leasehold. So leasehold is a type of ownership and right to occupy a property for a given period of time. And that's where you would get terms like a 99-year lease or sometimes a 999-year lease. You're also usually liable to pay what's called ground rent annually to the freeholder of the building. So this is the person who owns the actual building and the land upon which it sits. It's usually favourable to get something with a longer lease. The lower the lease, usually the lower the resale value of the property, as it is less appealing to mortgage lenders. They will be usually looking for something that's got at least 50 or 60 years left on the lease in order to offer you a mortgage. Freehold. So freehold is the simplest and most popular form of property ownership. It's simply where you own the building and the land upon which it sits. Probate. So if you're looking at a property that's on sale due to a probate sale, it's important you know what this means, as it could take time for the sale to complete. Probate is the official period of making sure that the will was valid and the property has been officially valued for inheritance tax purposes. It can take anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, but sometimes even longer for grant of probate if it's particularly complicated. So if you are looking at something that's going through probate, it's good to know what stage it's at and whether probate has been granted. Buy-to-let mortgages. So buy-to-let mortgages are specific mortgages used for the purposes of buying an investment property to let out. These are different from residential mortgages, and it's important you have the right kind of mortgage for your property purchase. A residential mortgage will have restrictions on what you can do, and if you do want to let out the property, you will need to seek consent from your mortgage lender. If you don't have consent to let out the property, then things like your buildings insurance could be invalidated. Power of attorney. Now this is an important one for anyone who's acting on behalf of somebody else. A power of attorney gives someone, usually a family member, the right to make decisions over somebody else's property. Now this could be property, money, health decisions. There's a whole range of different situations it can cover. And it can be a lasting power of attorney or enduring power of attorney. There are differences, and it does depend on whether or not the person is still alive but incapacitated, or they have passed away. We do recommend you take specialist advice on this. If you are looking to let out a property of somebody to pay for their care bills, for example, you will need to have a power of attorney in place in order to make those decisions and instruct your estate agent. Property chain or no onward chain. So this is to do with the amount of transactions that may be required in order to complete the sale of the property. So if you're a first time buyer, you're going to be the first person in the chain of transactions, but the person you're buying from may have another property that they're buying, and that person might have another one that they're buying, and that person might have another one that they're buying. So you could end up having 3 or 4 people in a chain of property sales that all need to complete at the same time in order to get the sale through. So that's why it can be quite important to have really good sales progressors in your estate agency, keeping everything together, making sure that everyone's on board, everyone's communicating, and the progress of the sale is carrying on. If something's advertised with no onward chain, it simply means that the vendor of the property doesn't have to find anywhere to move to in order to sell that property. So it could be it was previously let out, or it could be a probate sale, the owner has died, or it could be they've just moved already and it's just completely free and ready to go as soon as the purchase is ready. So that's just a few of the common terms that are queried when buying or selling a home. But if you do have any others that you're not sure about, then I'd be happy to try and give you an explanation. Thanks. My name's Caroline from Franklin Residential.